So now that we've done all the basics for formatting, I've been playing around with adding images I did in the last section. I'm actually going to go back a ways because I'd also changed the page size and some things. Oops, further than I thought. Okay, so we're back to about here. And we're going to make the book a little more awesome. I did this one, I did those two. So I've set it up, and this looks fine. This is basically a totally fine job at formatting. It's not going to look quite as good as it would in Adobe InDesign. Oh, one thing I forgot, interestingly enough. There are two spaces between all the sentences, which is one of the things I should have taken care of in the first video about removing spaces. So you just go to replace, and you hit the spacebar twice, and you replace the two spaces with one space. You replace all. So that's something I'll always have to do when I get a new manuscript from a new author, because a lot of people will draft their book with two spaces. It used to be the common rule that you do two spaces, but for actually printing the book, it's one space. So I just did that, which is kind of important. I should have done it a lot earlier. But what we're going to do now is just make everything a little bit cooler. So like these pages are probably fine. One thing you could do is add a little bit of a decoration up on top. Your main pages you don't really want to be fancy, but there are a couple places you could be a little fancier. Another thing to mention is that the bigger the design, the younger the reader. So for an older reader or genre where there's more older readers, you want to keep things really simple and clean. But for younger readers, for children's or for young adult, you want it to be more decorative, more beautiful. The fonts are bigger. So what a lot of authors do, once you learn how to do the fun stuff, it may be tempting to get carried away and add too much design, but you really want to err on the side of caution. Because if you add too many things, and if you're not a designer, and if they all conflict with each other, actually that won't look good. So let me just add a few things that I think look pretty good. One thing a lot of traditionally published young adult books especially do is they'll add a huge full-page image or spread at the front of the book. And that can just be like, it could just be the cover art. It could be, instead of like, you can just use your cover for the title page and have the same art and the same text and everything. But sometimes I'll do something like this. I'm just gonna move this down, and I'm gonna drag a picture into the book. And I just picked a couple like pretty pictures, nothing fancy. So I just got a picture of an ocean. And I'm gonna drag it here. I'm gonna double click on it so that I can see this rep text, and I'll go to behind text, which lets me move it kind of wherever I want. And basically like that, there's nothing there. It doesn't have to be there. But when they open the book, they see the title page. This, like a picture of something, especially nature or something that fits your book, I think can have a really strong impact on the reader experience of the books. Like I could have my title here. I've also seen some young adult books, they'll just double this. So you have like one full spread. You have to be careful where this is actually showing up so that it's actually the mirror image. It's not something else or on different pages that don't belong together. So you have to check your PDF carefully. But if you have one interior spread, like a full page spread with, for example, the place, sometimes you really want to add an image of like the place where your book takes place. But just for like having an emotional grounding, when you open a book and you see a big picture of an ocean, sometimes you'll have the text, like the title, spread across 2 pages, which is really cool, but pretty tough to get right if you're doing all this yourself in Microsoft Word. For that, you may need something more professional like InDesign. But I would probably just do like one nice picture. I could have a really nice quote. Some of my books have famous quotes in them, so I could have a nice quote here just to kind of get people in the right frame of mind and mood. That's a pretty simple thing you can do with your print book that looks really good. You could do it, I've thought about doing it for every chapter. I've thought about doing it just on the section breaks, like as you go through. Oh, that's interesting. I think because I hit so many spaces here, it added it to my navigation. Because like if you add some spaces here, this is all going to have the same heading style, and all the heading styles show up here. So even the spaces show up here, which is something to be aware of. So I'd watch out for that. So I'd add a picture of the front. I might add a picture somewhere else, but for now, let's go and see what we can do with chapter 1. This is already, like I said, this is clean. This looks fine. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we have some more room to play with. Some of the things you could do, I think I said earlier, is just make this uppercase, possibly change the font. You don't want to do too much. But for example, that looks fine. I might spread that out a little bit, which you can do if you go up to font, expanded. So that's a little bit of extra style that looks really nice. That could work. You can also add a drop cap. So I could go up here to insert. Hope I'll be able to find where they put drop cap in Word 2016. Oh, there it is. So that looks pretty good. Drop caps are a little tricky, especially if you want to change the font, because it makes that box, and it really has to fit in that box just the same way. You can move it around, and you can change the box if you wanted to play around with how that drop cap looks. And you could change the font if you want to get really fancy. But then you have to probably move the box around to make sure that all of the font is showing up. And this is probably like too much design. So especially now where we have a lot of different conflicting fonts, you really just want 2 fonts would be ideal, but 3 fonts can be okay if they're very simple. Like you don't want 2 or 3 fancy fonts. They're decorative fonts, but you could have a very simple serif, sans serif. No, this one's serif, this one's sans serif. You can have those that are very simple, and then you can have something that's a little bit more fancy, and that could be fine. So for this kind of book, if I wanted to have that drop cap, I could make this the same font and maybe make it really big. Which looks okay. If it's a novel, I probably wouldn't have a subtitle anyway. Like that subtitle was a little bit conflicting. But like this isn't really too much design, even though I may not do it this way. If you really liked it, you probably could get away with it. I might actually change this to something like this, which looks pretty good. I would need to add a lot more spacing since I got rid of that subtitle. And then because this is all caps, I probably wouldn't make this all caps. So I would just get rid of that part. Maybe add something like this. Maybe not. I don't know. These are things that you can play with. The other thing that's pretty cool is that you can add a picture in the background of your chapter 1 pages. So for example, I might grab something that's just a bit of texture or decoration, and I'll put it behind the text. And it's not going to show up very well. It's a little bit, you can see the gray is a little bit darker than the white, so you're going to see lines. So one of the ways I could fix it is by trying to boost the contrast. If I boost the contrast enough, you probably won't see any line there. And then I'll also make this a little darker. Let's see. I think there's a way to set the transparency, but it's been a while since I've used pictures in Word. Let me see what I can find. Yeah, so I don't see it. I think there were more options in in the earlier versions of Word. I'm going to see what format does. Brightness, contrast, layout. Yeah, I think they did have a transparency in earlier versions of Word, but I could be wrong. But I'm not seeing it here. Line, dash, color, transparency. Weird. So it's showing transparency, but it's grayed out, so I can't use it. You could also add... I'll play with this later, because this is actually where you would start to do some of the fancy stuff you could do for design. All I was trying to do... Also, now it's showing up. Let's see if that works. Nope. There should be a way to make that whole picture more transparent or less transparent. For some reason, that's not working for me. But what I was going to show you is just, you can put it, for example, there. And this would be a little hard to read, so I might make it bold. I'd probably get rid of this font because that font doesn't really match at all. And I think somehow I hid my chapter heading too. Maybe I have to put this, it is behind text already. But I might have deleted my chapter heading. It just got hidden. Anyway, so you could add something like this, which is super cool, but you have to make sure your text is all visible. So you might need to do something like move the chapter heading over here, move it higher. You could do something like if I tried to put this like this and have the text wrap around the picture. I generally wouldn't, though. That's kind of hard to read. So I'd actually just do it this way for the style, and then maybe make this bigger, smaller. So it's a little something that'll show up on every chapter heading, which will make the book really have a lot more style than other books. I'm having some trouble with getting all my spacing right now. Anyway, something like that looks pretty good. It could work. I'd have to go back and fix all my spacing. Word gets more and more fickle when you're trying to put the text and the pictures and putting it all together. So it can be tricky to get this set up right. But then you would just do this on all of the chapter pages. This is actually chapter 1. But yeah, it gets more and more difficult to try to actually do things when you have a bunch of layers that are really close together. I'm going to show you one thing on chapter 2. The same thing actually, just something a little cooler. I might want to add something like this. I'll have to figure out exactly how I want it to show up, but probably like this. And I can just copy, paste this picture to get another picture. I can rotate it to get it where I need it to go. There should be an easy rotate button too, which I'm not seeing, which is too bad. That's the remove background that I was looking for before, I was talking about. So they do have it. It just didn't show up in that other picture, which is kind of strange. But it shows up in this picture. How bizarre. I'll have to figure out exactly what's going on with Word 2016. In this picture, you could remove the background, and it would strip out all the background and leave you with just the art. Is what it should do. They've kind of changed a lot of things. I'm not sure where the button to flip things over, rotate things is, which is kind of important. Ah, here it is. So I want to just flip it horizontal. That's what I've been trying to do. And that way you can match these two up. Looks like this is going to need to be a little bit smaller. But you really wouldn't want to do it this way because it'd be difficult to get them to match. So what you really want to do is just make the one and then copy paste that one and then go up here to the rotate button, flip horizontal. And it's difficult to make sure these are exactly right. You'd probably want to do this in Photoshop or something and just have one image because you can't really lay things out perfectly in Word and make sure they're all the same. But on the other hand, if it looks pretty good, readers aren't going to notice anyway. So I could do something like that, which looks really cool. Again, this is something that I would want to set the transparency so that it's not 100%. But they don't really show that option. I'll try to do it one more time in format picture. Yeah, they're not going to let me set the transparency for that picture. There must be a way to do it. If not, I'm surprised because it's a pretty important feature. But I would set the transparency for the feature to about 50% so it's more grayed out, so it's not so dark. Because it's distracting if everything's dark. Also, the important thing is you can't have everybody look at everything at the same time. That's something that's really important with cover design. So you don't want, for example, this chapter 2 to be exactly as black, as dark as these images because it all fights for attention. And they won't know, like, if I had this bolded too, or if I had, like, everything is in all caps. There's too many things to look at too quickly, and nothing really looks good. So you have to decide what's the biggest and the darkest. What are they going to see first, and then what are they going to see second? There has to be an order to what we appreciate. It can't just be everything is big and dark at the same time, because that's when it starts looking confusing and kind of ugly. And then you could do something else, which is, if I put this one behind, this is also a little hard to get just right. Oops. It really should be working, but it seems like it's not. The chapter title should be over this picture, and the picture should be behind the chapter title. But for some reason, that's not working. So what I was going to do and show you is just that I could have something like this that's a frame. I need to send it behind the text, but I think it's already behind the text, so I'm not really sure. Ah, there it is. And then it's hard to actually get the image, so I'd have to, like, space down. Yeah, see, now that it's behind the text here, I actually can't grab that image anymore, which is frustrating. So I have to make some space so I can actually grab it, and then I can move it up again. Anyway, so this is getting pretty messy, but the idea was you could take a picture like this and put it behind the letter to start the chapter with, and that can look really good if everything's done well and laid out correctly. Yeah, so I've messed up a lot of my formatting now. I got rid of the paragraph break or the section break, which is why this isn't showing up anymore. Adding images and stuff to Word, you can definitely do it, but it's a little frustrating. As you can see, it's challenging to get everything just where you want it. and especially challenging to get everything exactly the same in every chapter. So especially if you're adding something like this, to make that exactly the same. What I would do once I finally had it as I wanted it, I would highlight this whole thing and copy it and go to the next paragraph from the same place, copy the whole thing and paste. And see, even that didn't work, which is too bad. So yeah, it's pretty frustrating to try to get everything in the same place, but it is possible. This is harder to get something like around the text. It was a lot easier just to set something up like in the corner. I want to play with this one too, just because it looks really cool. Now that I'm adding so many pictures, it's getting more and more frustrating to work with. Anyway, I'm going to add this video here. I feel like I'm kind of breaking my format as we go along, but that's how you can do some fun things with adding images to your picture and adding full width images, especially to your chapter pages, to add something up like in the top or the background. You could also add something just decorative like in the middle here. Sometimes they'll do a little scroll, and you can add something special to the section breaks, which I wouldn't really recommend. I think adding some kind of decoration in section breaks other than the 3 stars, which is kind of what most people use, I think that's less distracting. When you add like special pictures, they can be really cool. And it's okay for young adult books or children's books, but for most other genres, I think they're probably distracting, and I would just stick with 3 dots or 3 stars or something very simple. Okay, so this video kind of got away with me, but hopefully it was useful. This is the end of my series, but you can grab a bunch of free templates on DIYbookformats.com, and I put out a lot of other videos on book marketing and publishing stuff, so you can look for those on my YouTube channel. Thanks, bye-bye.